I can guarantee that you can hear fans. There's a fan going above me, there's a fan over there, there's a fan over there. It is summer for the following, like for yesterday and today where I live. And then it's gonna go back down into the 50s and 60s. Fans, open windows, all that stuff. We're just gonna deal with the sound. So what did I read and how did it go? I have played my game and prepared my slides and picked my 5 favorite reads. There's a lot of shadows going on. I don't have any lights on in here, but it's just natural light, but there's a lot of shadow. Let me rearrange you. I had you pretty perfect, but then Lola came and moved you. So we'll just see how this goes. Yeah, shadows and fan sounds. We're just gonna deal with it today. No, she's trying to help herself to my coffee. She loves cups, like anything that is a cup, even if it just has water in it, she wants to get into it. Favorites. Okay, I have 5 favorite reads this month. I'll start with the 2 that I don't own copies of yet. I read both of them on Audible or audio from my library. One was on my list of things to read on my TBR, and that was The Belle of Belgrave Square. This was such a great book. I loved this so much. It's just lighthearted and fun, but it touched on storylines that I really, really love. It was gothic. There was a mystery going on, but it was also lighthearted, and there were a lot of things that just felt like other things I loved. And then when I got to the end of the book, and Mimi Matthews, who's the author, was talking about it, she always does in her acknowledgement, she always says like an author's note and things like that. She mentioned that the things that she was inspired by for the creating of this particular story. And it was like Jane Eyre and Lady Audley's Secret and the Piece de Resistance, The Blue Castle by L.M. Montgomery, which is one of my favorite books of all time. I reread The Blue Castle every single year. If you haven't read it, you really should. Valency Sterling. And yeah, just great. Just really, really great. Fun read. I don't know that it's for everybody, but for me, it was definitely top of the list. And then I had this hold randomly come in and had it on hold for over a month, I think, and then suddenly it was just there. So I went ahead and I was like, I'll just give it a listen and see if I like it, and I loved it. And that is Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies by Heather Fawcett. This was just a warm, cozy, silly breath of fresh air. It is about I'm going to rearrange you again. It is about a kind of like an anthropologist, but she works with fairies, and she's traveled to this Scandinavian town. I think by invitation, maybe not by invitation, research the fairy activity and what's going on there. There's a mystery. I won't share anything about that, but there's a mystery. Then suddenly one of her university mates shows up and starts to kind of throw a wrench in things. I'll tell you from very early on, they tell you, so I'll say this too. She suspects he is a fairy. That comes with a lot of baggage, connotation, and implication, all worked into it. So anyway, super fun read. Really, really enjoyed it, and glad that there will be I think just a second, maybe it's a duology. I don't think it's a full series, but there will be a second one, because I was not done with these characters. They're so fun. They're so fun, and there's a romance, and it's just a really, really fun read. Then, number 3, these aren't ranked, but just the third one I'll mention, my book of the month pick, Lone Women by Victor Lavelle. This took me by surprise. That it was a favorite. I thought I would enjoy it, but I didn't know that I would enjoy it this much. And it is about a woman who, in the beginning of the story, you don't know why or what's happened, but she's set her house on fire, gotten into a wagon with a trunk that weighs tons, it's so heavy, taken that wagon to the coast, to San Francisco, I think, to get on a boat that will take her up to Seattle. So maybe not San Francisco, but somewhere along the coast, that will take her up to that will take her up to Seattle, so that she can then catch a train to Montana with this trunk and one carpet bag with books in it. And she is going to reinvent her life. She's going to claim a homestead, and she's going to homestead until that land is hers. And so all of this, what has happened, has to be unfolded for you It is a horror novel. There are monsters of all sorts and kinds, and it is just really, really well written. It was compulsive reading. I couldn't stop read it. Even if you think you don't like horror, yeah, there's some scary things in it. There's some suspenseful things and some unknown things, but it is just such a joy. It's a joy of a read if you read the whole thing. Okay, and then number 4, The Cloisters by Katie Hayes. This says book of the month. I picked this up as an add-on because it was the In Real Life Book Club pick for my people. And I read this in one day. I couldn't stop. I loved it. I know that it has some serious issues, and a lot of people in my group loved it, and some people, not a lot, some people in my group just absolutely hated it, and I think it has some pretty low reviews on Goodreads, but I am here to say that it is just such a voracious read. Like, you just want to keep reading, and I really enjoyed the mystery of it. I really enjoyed the unreliable narrator. I just thought that it was great. I thought everything about it was great. It's a fun thriller that is in a really scrumptious location, and the whole read just feels immersive and compulsive. Like, you cannot stop until you've reached the end. So, loved The Cloisters. And then I have 2 more, but I only have 1 more slot. So I'm going to say that I also loved number 5, The Teachers by Alexandra Robbins. This is a nonfiction. And Alexandra Robbins did, I think, 6 years of interviews of teachers across the country, all grades, all kinds of schools, public and independent, elementary, middle school, high school. I think she talked to some university teachers, she talked to preschool teachers, she talked to everybody. Eventually, through the writing of this book, she becomes a substitute teacher, a long-term substitute for 1 4th grade class. So not only does she interview teachers and research schooling and the history of school and what's happening now and public policy about education, but she becomes a teacher herself. This is the book about teaching, and it's so good. It follows the lives of 3 teachers in 1 year in their classrooms in different parts of the United States, in different classrooms, in different settings and systems, with different cultures. Also includes all of that research and her personal experience as well. It is heartbreaking and it is uplifting, and I think every single person who lives in the United States should be required to read it. It's excellent. And then I can't not say, I'm not going to include it in my favorites, but I can't not give a shout out, a huge shout out to this another feel-good read. This is The Cozy Mystery, Vera Wong's Unsolicited Advice for Murderers by Jessie Q. Sutanto, who wrote Dial A for Aunties and For Aunties in a Wedding. This Vera Wong is like the greatest nosy neighbor character ever. She is so funny and so well-meaning and so misguided, and you never get frustrated with her because you empathize with her the whole time. You understand where she's coming from and how her terrible decisions are really coming from a genuine place of goodness and wanting to help and be supportive. And then, of course, because it's cozy, it's happy in the end. There is a murder, but I did not know. I could not figure out who had done the murder or how the body had ended up, where it had ended up. I was in the dark that whole time and loved every second of this read. Laugh out loud funny in places. Highly recommend. If you haven't picked up any Jessie Q. Sutanto before, that might be a good place to start. Okay, those are my favorites. I can hold up almost all of them. Get your hands on any of those. Lone Women, The Cloisters, The Teachers, Vera Wong's Unsolicited Advice for Murderers, Emily Wilde, and The Belle of Belgrave Square. Such a fun reading month, if those 5-6 favorites are any indication. Here we go. These are the books that I read. There's a lot of them, and they deviate greatly from my intended TBR. That's okay. We're just gonna go through them all, and I played the game, and I'm ready to roll. Let's see. first, I got The Invisible Hour by Alice Hoffman. This was an advanced reader's copy, so this is coming out in a couple of months, and if you have the opportunity, you should get your hands on it. There's a lot I can't say about the cleverness of it because it would reveal too much about the story, but it starts out as realistic historical fiction with an unwed teen mother running away, feeling like she doesn't have any other recourse, running away. I think it's in the 70s or the 60s, and ending up being recruited into a commune, a cult commune in Massachusetts, and having her baby there and raising her baby there, and then that baby grows up and has a not realistic fiction experience with Nathaniel Hawthorne, the author of The Scarlet Letter. I can't tell you how all of that happens or what happens or where it leads, but it's so good, and you should get your hands on a copy when it gets released. So the question that went with The Invisible Hour was, what's the oldest book on your read pile this month? What was happening in the world the year that it was published? And the answer to that would be Mariana by Monica Dickens. Monica Dickens is Charles Dickens's great granddaughter, and she was an author in the 1940s and 50s. And Mariana is a book that is published by Persephone Books. It got reintroduced to the world by Persephone Books, and it is quite good. It's a little slow and dull at times, but it's quite good. What was happening when this was published? So I've got the whole list right here, but I'll go ahead and read through it. Winston Churchill became the Prime Minister of England. Franklin Delano Roosevelt was elected for an unprecedented third term in the U.S. presidency. Germany invaded Denmark, Norway, France, Luxembourg, Belgium, and the Netherlands. Nylon stockings went on sale for the first time. Hattie McDaniel became the first African-American woman to win an Academy Award. The first Captain America comic book was published. Pinocchio was released for the first time. The Rangers versus the Canadiens hockey game was the first ever to be televised. So all of those things happened the same year that Mariana was released into the world. Next, I got The Forgotten Cottage. This was number 20, Share Your Book of the Month or In Real Life Book Club book, which I've already done, so I'll just go ahead and put those up here. Lone Women and the Cloisters, and both of them ended up on my top favorites for the month. Then we had which book had the best ending. I ended up getting Mariana on the spinning wheel, so Mariana came up, and the number associated with Mariana was 32, which book had the best ending, and that's going to be The Invisible Hour by Alice Hoffman. Best ending, can't tell you anything about it. The best read of the month. So when Antony and Cleopatra came up, the number associated with that is 46, and that prompt is best read of the month, and you've already heard about it, so I'm just going to put it up here. That is The Belle of Belgrave Square. What made it the best read of the month? Just who I am and what it is. It's just such a feel-good breath of fresh air, gothic romance, and I loved it. I loved the first in this trilogy that follows, each book is a standalone and follows 3 different friends. And I read the first one in January, and I really enjoyed it. But this one it's my favorite. It's so good. There's a new one coming out in January of 2024, which of course I'll read. But right now, I think this may be my favorite Mimi Matthews book out of all of them that I've read so far. Waypoints, My Scottish Journey came up, and the number associated with that is number 8. Choose a book and pair it with a film. So I read The Ark, The Year of Second Chances by Laura Avery, and I am going to pair that with P.S. I Love You. In The Year of Second Chances, which I think a lot of people will like, but it looks very lighthearted and romancy, and it is, but not lighthearted. It's dealing with grief. It is a grieving book. Basic premise is that a woman lost her husband to a battle with, I believe, cancer, some sort of cancer, and while he was dying in the hospital, he purchases a 1-year subscription. He purchases a 1-year subscription on an online dating site and creates a profile for her, and she doesn't know it. And then a year after his death, she gets an email saying, you have this profile created by so-and-so. And it's basically her dead husband forcing her to start going on dates with strangers that she meets on this online dating site. Very much reminiscent of P.S. I Love You, the entire thing. Very much reminiscent of P.S. I Love You. P.S. I Love You, the husband is very, like, he has died, and he's left these messages for her, and she goes on this trip, but it's very much for her to learn to live again. In the year of second chances, like, he's forcing her to replace him after 1 year. Like, it's just weird. It's a weird concept to me. I think that it was not very well thought out, and it is very, very reminiscent of P.S. I Love You. So it was not a favorite read. It was a fine read. If I had never heard of P.S. I Love You, I might have thought it was a unique concept, as is, and knowing what I know, it just kind of, it lacks sparkle. It lacks, I couldn't get behind it. I couldn't support it. The way that it gets rolled out, the pushiness of the dead husband was just kind of yucky to me. And then there's also all of this bickering and fighting within her family, her and her mom, and just like all sorts of things. It was not my read. It was not my read, but it might be your read. So keep your eye on it if that sounds fun or if it looks interesting to you. Then I got Jamie Ford's The Many Daughters of Afang Moy, and this was number 32, the most quotable book. I think the most quotable book is The Teachers by Alexandra Robbins. If you read my Goodreads review, you will see that I have just put like my 5 things reviews, where I say 5 things about the book that I'm reviewing, are mostly quotes. So definitely the most quotable book. Have a look at it when you have a chance. And then I got Catherine Sinter's The Bodyguard, which I read but was not on my TBR at all. So many of these that I've just mentioned were not on my TBR at all, but hey, they were good for that moment. And the question associated with this was, which book is set furthest away from your current location? And that would be Water, Wood, and Wild Things by Hannah Kirshner. This was such an interesting, slow, kind of meditative memoir, travelogue, cultural, like anthropological work. It is by a woman who goes to, or is invited to Japan to learn from the person who is considered to be like the expert on soji. And she learns how to make soji and where it comes from, but in order to do that, she has to understand the land, and she has to understand the growth process. She has to understand wood and the processes that wood go through as they're trees, and then how they're cut, and then how they're handled and processed. And like, she has to go backwards through every step that leads to this cup of soji and this soji drinking experience, this soji ceremony. It's just beautiful. Like, the book is really beautiful. It's something that I didn't know anything about. I still don't necessarily feel like I know much about it, but I know about how it made her feel. Biggest message I think that comes across in it is just process over product, process over product, process over product, and then product takes care of itself. I think that she's trying to say that about community and relationships and the making of soji, and also process over product. So it was very, very interesting read. I don't think I've ever read anything quite like it. And she also includes a lot of her little sketches that she does in her journal. It really does feel like reading someone's journal, like an annotated journal. It's a beautiful thing. It's a weird and a beautiful experience, and I highly recommend it if it sounds like your kind of thing. Then The Teachers came up, and the book associated with The Teachers is the question associated with Teachers is choose a book and pair it with a television show. So we got a lot of questions this time that we don't normally get. And I picked Water, Wood, and Wild Things, and I paired it with the Netflix series, The Makanai, Cooking for the Maikau House, or the Maikau House. And this was a series that I really enjoyed this past winter on Netflix. I don't know that a lot of people have watched it. I think it's based on a manga series, and it is just about a girl who wants to become a geisha, and, well, 2 girls who go off to become geisha, and one is definitely suited for the job, and the other is not, and she becomes the cook for the whole house that her geisha mothers and her sisters live in. I don't know all the terminology. I'm sorry. All these levels of people have different names. They're not all called geisha. But it's just the process of the first year of their lives in this old custom system, and how they interact with people, and how people interact with them, and how they have a friendship. It's just, there's conflict, but there's no antagonist in the show at all. There's conflict. There are people who are, I was going to say students, they're not really students, but there are people who make mistakes, but nobody's like malicious about anything. It's just a really warm, feel-good show about growing up and growing up in a culture that is so very different from anything that we in the West understand. And there's also a little romance, but it is a romance that is very gentle and quiet and doesn't really materialize, but it's there, and it's like a part of their lives and a part of who they become, and it's just lovely. It's just a really lovely show, and I would say that Water, Wood, and Wild Things would be a perfect pairing, or they go hand in hand, these two. But I also want to pair The Teachers with Abbott Elementary. So many of the things in Abbott Elementary parallel the findings in The Teachers and the reporting in The Teachers. Abbott Elementary is a hilarious show that is packed full of punches of truth. Give that a watch too, especially if you're a teacher or a parent. Then I got Uncultured, and I'm supposed to show you the longest and the shortest books. And so those would be The Drums of Autumn by Diana Gabaldon and the 5th volume in Witch Hat Atelier, and they're so different from each other. Witch Hat Atelier is a manga series that I started this past summer, and I've slowly been making my way through it, and I really enjoy it. It is about a small cohort of girls who are learning to become the witches that they are. You don't really get to become or choose to be a witch. You either are or you aren't, except this one girl didn't think she was a witch at all, and then finds out that she has these powers when she accidentally turns her mother into stone. There's a lot of high stakes stuff that happens in these. They get a little bit scary at times. Ultimately, it is a coming of age story and an adventure story, and she's trying so hard to hone her powers so that eventually she can know who she is, where these powers have come from for her, and can save her mother. So it's just been a great ride. The cartoon, like the drawing, is just so delightful. And then of course Drums of Autumn is in the Outlander series. I'm not going to say much about it. It's deep into the series, and I'm not going to say much about it. I'm still going strong with the Outlander series. Going strong, going to keep on going with it. Then we got the Rural Diaries, and the prompt associated with this is which book had my least favorite character. And I had a really hard time with this one this month. I read the arc Walking with Sam by Andrew McCarthy, and it is a nonfiction, so I don't know if I can really call him a character, but I really do think he was a caricature of who he really is. Andrew McCarthy wrote this book about walking the Camino Trail with his son, his teenage son Sam, and I just didn't find the rendering of Sam to be very believable for a teenage boy traveling with his father. If I were Sam, I would be embarrassed by the way that I've been portrayed. But the thing that I really don't believe that Andrew McCarthy has portrayed himself in a realistic way either. It's just a kind of weird writing style, and I feel like there wasn't a story there. I feel like he needed to write a book, so they went on a walk, instead of they went on a walk that led to them needing to write a book, if that makes sense. It reads like that, and it reads a little bit pompous. Sorry, Andrew McCarthy. But the way that he's written Sam is just really over the top, overly dramatic, and it doesn't ring true. So that is my least favorite characterization that I read this month. Then Lone Woman came up, and it was share one of the Read Harder books you read this month. One of the Read Harder books I read this month was Witch Hat Atelier. So I've already talked about that, and I will move forward. I actually didn't read another one this month because I was supposed to read Free Water, but my library hold didn't come in until now. So I'm actually reading it now, and I won't finish it probably until May, and I'm going to count it in May. So no big deal, but I didn't have a chance to read another Read Harder this month. So which hat atelier it is. And then Vera Wong's Unsolicited Advice came up, and that was reread, recommend, and unhaul. And I would reread The Belle of Belgrave Square. I would recommend Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies. And I will unhaul Sarah Pierce's The Retreat. So Sarah Pierce, I did read it. I'm very proud of myself, actually. And I actually did enjoy it more than I enjoyed the first one in this series, The Sanatorium. It's Sarah Pierce. She's got these premises that get me every time I want to read the book. I want to know that story. The chapters are like half a page long. That's an exaggeration, but seriously, many of them are 1 page long. And the people are just so annoying. They're so annoying, especially the detective that is the key that holds all these together. I just don't like her at all. I don't like her at all. She speaks very badly about herself constantly, and I just don't like being in her head. We were not in her head in The Retreat as much as we were in the Sanatorium, which made it, for me, a better reading experience. However, I still just really do not get on with Sarah Pierce's writing. Great premise, terrible for me execution. So I will not be picking up any more Sarah Pierce in the future, and I will be unhauling The Retreat. Then then Testimony by John Ward, Inside the Evangelical Movement That Failed a Generation. I got this as an ARC. I got an actual physical copy, which was awesome. And it is a power punch of a book. It is coming out, I think, in September, and if you grew up in the evangelical movement, I think that you should pick it up. This is not a teardown of anything at all. It is not an attack in any way, shape, or form. John Ward is a Christian and grew up in the evangelical movement. He is also a highly acclaimed and respected secular journalist, and what he has done here is written his memoir of growing up in the evangelical movement, and also is reporting on the ways that the evangelical movement, how do I say this, lacked scriptural foundation, and purposefully rejected any attempts within its own community at true discipleship and training, so that many people who were full of nefarious purposes rose to the top and ultimately had complete control over large segments of not only their population, but the country's population, and how their whims negatively impacted not only the church as a whole, but the country as a whole. And it's not, I promise you, it is not a takedown. He has very good memories of his childhood. He is very fair. He's not unbiased, obviously, but he's aware of his bias, and he's trying to present a very fair and researched account, I guess I'll say, of growing up and the results. So like the country growing up and him growing up kind of simultaneously, side by side. It's very well done. Get your hands on it if it sounds of interest to you. So the prompt that goes with this book, though, is summarize your 10th book, but in rhyme. So my 10th book the 10th book I read in the month of April was The Many Daughters of Ah Fong Moy, or the 10th book I finished in the month of April was The Many Daughters of Ah Fong Moy by Jamie Ford. So here is my poem. Ah Fong Moy was the first Chinese woman to set foot in the States. Reading of her treatment makes the heart break. Wrongs committed against Moy passed down her line. Her DNA changes and the pains do not answer to time. In the near future, Dorothy Moy, inheritor of the memories of Greta, Zoe, Faye, and Lai King, refuses to allow her own daughter Annabelle to suffer and sink. Under the weight of all that her late female relatives suffered, seeking answers, she finds the geneticist, Dr. Shedhorn, whose methods can create a buffer. Inherited trauma, not just drama, Shedhorn's treatment helps turn pain from a full stop to a comma. A hopeful take on the way we break hearts, souls, and minds and pass cracked selves down lines to younger generations. Thank you. Then the bookbinder came up. This was also an arc that I did not intend to read, by Pip Williams. This was a great read as well. And it was which book had your favorite character in it, and broken record, that's me this month, but Bella Belgrave Square, favorite main characters. Next, the Air Affair came up, which was kind of a miss for me. I did not hate it, and I did finish it, but it wasn't like, oh, this book is so great and I need to pick up the next one. And I kept losing interest in it, and I kept having to force myself back to it. I'm glad that I did. I wanted to know what happened. I just didn't want to have to read it. I'm told that the next in the series is better. I don't know that I will get there. We'll see. But anyway, the Air Affair came up, and it says, summarize the 4th book you finished reading this month. And that was Vera Wong's Unsolicited Advice for Murderers. So, to summarize this book, and I think this is my last prompt, this is the last one. To summarize this book, I can even hold it up. To summarize this book, there is an elderly woman, and she lives above a tea shop, and she is widowed, and her son doesn't keep in contact with her. She's constantly texting him, but when she texts him, she shows her love by telling him what to do. And that, he's an adult, and that gets kind of old. Like she tells him like when to get up in the morning and when to brush his teeth and like what kinds of foods to eat and all of these things. And so he just kind of ignores her most of the time. And her tea shop is basically dead. She has one regular customer who comes in all the time to get tea for his wife, who is at home with Alzheimer's, and it's his like 5 minutes. It's literally 5 minutes of his piece. And so she basically keeps her whole tea shop up and running and open for him. And she has a lot of ancestral knowledge about tea, and she makes it, very purposefully for each individual that she is serving. And so she thinks ahead about him and who he is and what he's going through and his astrological signs and just like all these things. She thinks through it all, and the reader gets to go through her process of choosing different ingredients to mix together in the teas that she creates. Well, one day she comes down, or one evening, she comes downstairs into her tea shop to find a dead body lying there. And she's very practical. And so she's not scared or anything, but she does wonder about the backstory and how this person got there. And she calls the police. And this leads to her having interactions with a lot of people. It opens her world. This experience opens her world. But it also opens the world of the wife of the man who's killed, who you're also following her story, and a couple of other characters that I won't mention, just for fun surprises. It's a found family story. Ultimately, it's a found family story, and it's just a really well done and beautiful tale that is also hilarious. It is hilarious. So I hope that it's going to be a series, because I really would love more Vera Wong adventures. I think it's a much more sustainable series than Dial A for Aunties. I don't think there's anywhere else that one can go. I think it has to stay as a duology, because you're going to have more people just randomly die everywhere you go and have to be blamed for it. And I suppose that's what happened here too, but it's a very different way, and it's a more open setup. There are many different kinds of mysteries that can happen for Vera in this kind of setup, and there are many other relationships that she can build, and there are still unknowns about the relationships that are forming in the books. I mean, in this particular book as well. So I hope that there will be more Vera Wongs in the future, but if not, this one is incredibly satisfying and a wonderful read. So on that note, I will say Mary Shelley May is happening in 2 days. Please sign up for the read-along. Join the Discord group if you want to. There's a link in the link tree below. If you don't want to be part of that, that's totally fine too, but do let me know if you are reading, if you do have a Mary Shelley May TBR, and if you are going to make any bookmarks for it. That's one of the prompts. Please do share that bookmark on Instagram so that I can include it in the wrap-up for May. Anyway, let's go read.